welcome to the show. Very happy to have you here. I wanted to invite you because I went to the Biohacker Summit last year and you made me realize that sex is a big part of our health. I was not aware of that. And you said, I think you said literally, sex is a primal force we have to take care of. And I hope that we can have a good talk about that today. But first, I would like you to introduce yourself to the listener. Who is Anna Lindfors and how did you end up here?
Well, thanks for having me. I'm really excited about diving deep into the topic of sex and biohacking intimacy and connection. And to the question, who is Anna Lindfors? I feel like that's what I'm figuring out. We're all figuring out who we are becoming. Every day we discover something new. But just to give you a brief background, professionally, my background is in psychology, sexology. I'm a specialist in sexological therapy. And as part of my, postgrad specialization, I was working with clients who had trauma and, just blocks sexually. And then I just thought to myself, okay, how do I help these people? How do I help them to reconnect? Because you cannot heal in your head what's happening in your body. So that's why I created a new method of therapy. I call it the HEAL method. And in that method, we integrate biohacking methods like breathwork, meditation, grounding, looking at nutrition, hormones, different factors that then help you heal and help you process trauma and help you reconnect with your body. So that's kind of my background professionally. Obviously, I'm a biohacker. I love looking into my body, connecting with myself. But I would say that I have a more feminine approach to biohacking because when we hear the word biohack, often we think of supplements or mind over matter and like these super hard protocols and like doing all of these, this and this and this and that and performing. But to me, biohacking is about reconnecting. And I think that's what we're going to dive deeper in today's episode.
Definitely. Well, beautifully said already. Obviously, I want to talk about that connection with yourself and with others. How did you, because I have the feeling that all Finnish people are biohacking. Maybe I'm biased because of the Biohacker Summit, but they seem like very healthy people. How did you end up in biohacking? Because I feel that's a big part of your therapy as well.
I mean, Finnish people, we definitely carry that nature gene in our bodies. So we all love to do foraging and, picking berries and, grounding and all of these factors. And also the nature can be pretty extreme. You go from darkness to light. So you need to adapt and you need to connect with nature. But for me, I would say my journey into biohacking started from losing my health. I was diagnosed with endometriosis when I was 20. And at that age, it's a pretty big diagnosis. For those listeners who have no idea what endometriosis is, it's basically a medical condition where the lining of your uterus starts growing outside the uterus. And it's I think it's one of the top 20, top 15 most painful conditions in the world. So, and it really does impact all aspects of your life. But I was a typical, 20-year-old woman. I was like, I'm strong, I'm independent, I was an athlete. I was a student. I was like, this is not going to impact me. So I would literally be in severe pain. I would have so bad pain that I would pass out in the morning and I would still get up, go to my lecture because I didn't want that to let that affect me. And then I went through all these different hormonal treatments and then treating the side effects of those. And I just had enough. It was disconnecting me from my femininity, from my sensuality, from that womanhood, because as a young woman, you're supposed to be celebrating, you're supposed to be exploring. And then when the source of your womanhood becomes a problem, and then you shift into this problem fixing mode. It's like, okay, what do? I do this and I do that to fix it. That's not where you want to be. And I think for me, I mean, there was just this one, I talked about this in one podcast, but this one moment in lying in a hospital bed, and it was just this turning point for me after I had lost my health and there were some mistakes done, and I was just like, no, this is not how I want to live. There's more to life. Started biohacking. I think 4 weeks later I was hiking in Scotland. It all, going from being in such a bad state that I couldn't even walk up the stairs. So 4 weeks later, so I was hiking in Scotland. I was like, okay, this is pretty cool. I can elevate my health. I can do all these things, and then I started biohacking and looking at different supplements and how to support my hormones, and looking into my genetics, and optimizing methylation and detox processes and all of these things. But I think what happens for many biohackers is that you start with that superficial stuff. Okay, there's something going on in my body and I need to optimize it. And then you do, and you realize that, wait, actually, this goes deeper. Actually, this is a manifestation of trauma that I've been carrying inside me. This is a manifestation of me being disconnected from myself. And the answer is reconnecting. And yes, the supplements help. And yes, all the protocols help. But that's at the core. It's such a long answer to your question, but that's how I started. That's how I started.
You already made the bridge to my next question, because I think that's a fundamental part of biohacking as well. I often get the question, oh, you're busy with your health. You must be very healthy. But like you mentioned, it's to me, it's more of an intention of life. It's not the HRV that has to go up. It's more of a result of an intentional life. And that's something I recognize in your story as well. So I think it's beautiful that you came at that spot in your life at that moment in time where you reconnected with yourself. And I find it interesting because, of course, there's not just one moment in time where you had that connection with yourself, but could we explore what is it that makes biohackers want to reconnect, at least you want to reconnect, and how you get to that point? Because it is so easy to approach biohacking like conventional medicine, to see, oh, I need an aspirin because I have a headache. It is easy to go into biohacking and to do the same with supplements. Could you? Yeah, it's hard to describe that maybe because it's never one moment. But could you elaborate more on that? How to get to that point? It was also a long question.
First, before I answer, I want to give you a brief anecdote but I think it highlights just how individual biohacking is. What you mentioned about HRV and how it should go up, and in the biohacking community, we have this kind of understanding: oh, the higher the HRV, the healthier you are. But actually, that's not necessarily the case, because each one of us, we have an optimal range. And for some, it's lower. There are differences between men and women. There are differences within men and women. But that's just another example that if you approach biohacking from the performance mindset, and then you become obsessed with, oh, I need to get my HRV up, and I need to be, because that's a sign that I'm healthy. That's actually not the case. And I believe that every single biohacker defines what biohacking means to them based on their needs. How do you know your needs? And that's the tricky part, because knowing yourself and understanding yourself requires you to pause and actually take the time to understand what's going on. Because like you said, it's so much easier just to take a pill and say, okay, I have a headache. Now I'm going to take, a painkiller to make it go away. But instead of that, I think biohacking is pausing to feel the pain. Okay, what's going on? What is this pain telling me? What's causing this? Am I dehydrated? Am I tense? Is it a migraine type of headache? What is it? Emotional pain? Am I having a fight with my partner? Am I sexually blocked? There's so many different factors. Or is it an autoimmune reaction to some food? There's so many things that could cause that headache. And then when you pause to listen to your body and understand the purpose of the pain, then you can make the changes. If it's dehydration, you can drink some electrolytes, water, rest, salt, If it's emotional pain, you do journaling, you rest, you discuss with your partner, you learn how to communicate. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but to me, biohacking is about getting to know yourself and then optimizing your life based on what you need, not what society tells you that you need, not what other biohackers tell you what you need. It's about you empowering yourself through knowing yourself.
I agree. Thank you. I think that's a beautiful answer. And I think it is not common to approach it like a journey. And the way you just described that sounds more like a journey to explore yourself.
I think it's a way of life. It's a way of being. Yeah.
Exactly. It's not a goal, more of an exploration. And
it changes all the time.
Sorry, please proceed.
Sorry, no, I was saying that, like you said, there is no goal. It's a way of being. It's a way of life. For example, for women, we go through so many different phases. First with menstruation, optimizing our hormones, then with fertility, and then pregnancy, and then, dealing with the hormones after that. Menopause, there's so many things, also different life phases that men go through, and how you're impacted by different environmental factors and what's going on with your hormones and work and stress and kids and all of these factors. So the way you biohack in your 20s looks very different to how you biohack in your 50s.
It does. And it all requires awareness of your own body and emotions, I guess. I also find it interesting how you focus, of course, because you're a woman, on cycle-based living. I feel like that is a topic that should be discussed more because, well, I'm a man. I'm not going to talk about it for you, but obviously a woman goes through so much. And could you elaborate more on the different phases during a cycle and how you can not optimize per se, that might not be the right word, but how could you make the cycle serve you more instead of working your way through your cycle like in a very harsh way? Could you elaborate on that more?
Yeah, I love that question, and I think cycle-based living, and for women, just reconnecting with your cycle, that's such a feminine form of empowerment. And we've all seen the memes, on social media, where it's like, women, 1 week you're super horny and you just want to rip your partner's clothes off, and then the next week the way they chew irritates you, like you cannot even stand their presence. And that's all related to your hormones. Men go through this circadian rhythm with hormones, so basically you let's say your state changes throughout the day, but it's pretty similar every single day. But then for women, on top of that circadian rhythm, we have an infradian rhythm. The average cycle length is 28 days, but for women it really varies from, between 21 to 35 days. So you can imagine the kind of shifts that the women go through in their cycles. And I guess the best way to describe a menstrual cycle is by first starting with the period. And that's when you bleed, that's when your hormones are low, that's when your energy is low, there might be a bit of bloating and cramps and inflammation. So during that time, that's the best time for introspection. Going inwards, reflecting. In terms of work, it's better to rest or kind of do lighter tasks for the first 2 days. In terms of exercise, that's a good time to rest, not push your body, because you're literally 3D printing an organ. This is something we don't really discuss that much. But women produce an organ every single month, and it takes work. And yes, women can, there are all these campaigns. Oh, women we can run marathons on our periods, and we can run governments. Yes, we can, but do you necessarily need to push yourself? So I think a part of cycle-based living is just knowing that, okay, I don't need to perform the same every day. And when you take that time during your period to rest and recover, and then you enter follicular phase after that, and your hormones start to rise, and it's so exciting, and you feel so good in your body, and you're full of ideas, and your workouts are going so well. This is the best time to plan, be creative, schedule things for your ovulation. So for example, what I like to do is, use the follicular phase for planning, creation, and so on. And then my ovulatory phase is for all my meetings, podcast interviews, all of these things. So I schedule them there when possible, because that's when I feel super energized. I feel like I'm shining, I got that sparkle. And that's what women feel. And also, our libido follows that cycle. So during menstruation, you don't really have that desire. And then follicular phase kicks in, and it's like, it's delicious. You feel that vibrance, that force, that energy. And at ovulation, it's at peak. And that's the best time, to explore, connect with your partner. And then after ovulation, you go down a bit. You go from that excitement, from climax, to a bit more resting phase in your luteal phase. And that's when your body prepares for menstruation again. So you don't feel that desire as much. You might feel a bit sluggish. But actually, when you balance your hormones, luteal phase is the perfect time for executing tasks. So in follicular phase, you plan, and then luteal phase, you execute. In terms of training, you should not push yourself too hard in luteal phase. So for example, in luteal phase, I train in the afternoon. Follicular phase is in the morning, kicking ass, grinding hard. Luteal phase, a bit more relaxed. And by knowing my body, by knowing my cycle, I can perform at a much higher level and enjoying the grind, enjoying the work that I do. And, I do work a lot and I'm passionate about what I do. But when it comes from love, when it comes from connectedness, it comes from such a different place than burning myself out and trying to perform and trying to fight against my body and push it to do things that it's not supposed to do. And I think for women, reconnecting with your cycle is the key to not only optimizing your performance, to optimizing or elevating your biohacking, but it really is about learning to love yourself as you are and understanding that femininity. And this is something we need as a society. We need to understand that femininity and womanhood is not a weakness, it's a strength. And we all have some healing to do when it comes to femininity, reconnecting with those aspects of ourselves.
It's such a great insight. I find it so interesting that if you work with it, you can actually, not in a performance state, but not in a performance way, but you can actually get more out of it in a more meaningful way during your days, during your weeks, during your period. And I also think that if you are more loving to yourself when you are in your period, for example, that intention will also flow in the rest of your life if you take care of yourself in the down times, if I am allowed to call it a downtime.
Yes, I mean, you can call it downtime or whatever, but I guess my point is that, I went from being barely able to function for half of the month and just being in debilitating pain, and now into celebrating my cycle, celebrating my womanhood, celebrating my femininity. And the hormonal fluctuations, they don't need to be seen as something that makes you weak, or, women are hormonal, is she on her period, all of these things. Yes, you can be hormonal. And yes, you can feel tired during your period, and that does not make you weak. That makes you a woman, and it's normal to feel that way. The problem is that now as a society, we don't value that, and we see that as a sign of weakness, and we need to change that. I think also for men, just understanding that women are cyclical and understanding women's cycle helps you become a better man, helps you understand your partner, helps you support them in what they need, and help elevate that connection through that. Such a simple thing makes such a big difference. Instead of wondering, like, okay, so yesterday she was all about me, and then today, nothing. Instead of being confused by that and feeling rejected, you understand, okay, now she's in her luteal phase, so her desire is lower. It's nothing to do with me. How can we connect in a way that suits us both? Because, I mean, and we're going to talk about sex and different ways of connecting, but there's so many ways to build intimacy that do not include sex. Sex is actually a pretty small part. And I love the fact that, because I talk about sex, but it's not actually about sex at all. It's about connecting, it's about intimacy, and there are so many forms of that. I think the more we understand it, the more we expand it, the better we feel about ourselves and in our relationships.
Again, that is beautifully put. I always get very excited when we can compare things to nature, to that things go in harmony. And that's also why I wanted to talk to you today, is because preparing for this podcast, I obviously had to think about what does sex mean for me. And I did not come any further than a connection between two people. The physical act for me was what I came up with, is the physical act was just an outcome of the connection that happens before the physical act. I hope that makes sense. And this whole podcast is built around how to take away from what is happening so that we can flow more in that what we want to do, whether it's making music or having sex or cooking or investing. To me, it's all the same. Creating the right environment, and environment sounds not very sexy, but creating the right environment.
Oh, it does. It definitely does.
Okay, good. I'll leave that in. But talking about creating the right environment, I also think that biohacking can really enhance that. And you talked about the 28-day cycle. How do you design your day to, okay, let me think about the right words for that, to flow from the one cycle to the other instead of being from one rigid period to another? That was not the right word. From one cycle to the other. How do you flow from those periods? And then talking about morning routine, maybe afternoon, evening routine. I can imagine that they differ, but you have some basics to elaborate on.
So the way I function is that I look at my cycle as one chapter. The average woman has 13 cycles in a year. So instead of this weekly calendar, I mean, I do live by this weekly calendar and the yearly calendar, but I have a calendar and I map out my cycle. And I'm like, okay, now I'm in my menstruation. So now it's all about kind of clearance, letting go, and ending things. That's the correct term, but like ending the cycle. Because it's funny how in the medical terms, it's seen that your cycle starts from your menstruation. And to me, I feel like that's the end. That's the end of it. But really, they chose to look at your menstruation as the start because it's an easy, sign of your cycle. But the way I see it more as an ending of a chapter. And then I see, okay, here I'm in my follicular phase. Here is my expected ovulation. Obviously, I track my cycle with, the biometrics from wearables, and I measure my temperature orally every morning. Yeah, so I look at, like, here am I in my follicular. Here's my expected ovulation. Here's my luteal phase. What's happening for me next month? And then I put things. Okay, here's what I did this. Here's when I did this. And obviously, there are times when I can't schedule all my podcast interviews for my ovulation. That's just part of life. But I think the key is to knowing your cycle and know, like, okay, now I'm in my luteal phase. So this means that I feel this way, so I can be kind to myself. And I can, I love to say the sentence is that every single day we do our best, and every single day our best looks different. So that's how I plan my life. But also feel that, especially for us women, we need to leave room for spontaneity, because it's not just about your phase of cycle. It's also about how you sleep, how you eat, how you actually feel in your body that impacts your performance. And it's this constant reconnecting that you do, and then you live your life accordingly. Sometimes you need to push yourself to finish a big project, or you talk on stage, or you have these big things that you need to accomplish. So then you push yourself, and then you schedule rest. But if you want to go specifically into those routines, what I like to talk about in podcasts is especially reconnecting with that sexual energy. tapping into that sensuality that we all can do, that are such simple tools that really set your day. So one example is sensual dance in the morning. It sounds so simple, and yet it's so powerful. Really, by taking one song each morning, you can listen to it. I've created a playlist. I can add the link here so then your listeners can access it. But either doing it naked or fully clothed, but you tune into the music and you listen to your body and see, okay, what sound resonates with me today? What do I feel like? What energy do I want to cultivate? And it can be a bit softer, can be a bit kind of calmer, and you tune and you can try different kinds of touches or massage and stroking and moving. You can close your eyes or you can look into the mirror and just create that moment of love with your body. Because so often we look into the mirror and you're like, okay, this is what I would want to change. Oh, I look a bit tired, and you know what's going on. Or with women, especially during menstruation, it's like, oh, I look so bloated, and but what if you took 3 minutes to appreciate yourself, to appreciate your body, not think about anything, not think about the day that's coming, but really just connecting. So simple, and it's so powerful. And what I've noticed is that this can also be a bit triggering, and that's why I want to say this to your listeners, especially if you have trauma or you feel very disconnected from your body. So the first steps when you take into that, and especially men tell me that they struggle with this at first, but then they do it. It's like, whoa, what is this? This is a whole new world. Because the idea for a lot of men is like, wait a minute, so I'm supposed to listen to some music, close my eyes, and dance naked, just alone. And it's like, what? And then you do it, and it's like, whoa. This just like, can I feel this in my body? And I think it comes from, because a lot of men perceive their sexuality through their ability as a lover, through their ability to please women, and then you try all these different positions, and you look for instructions from porn, and you try all of these different things. But what if your sexuality could be for you? And what if you could enjoy yourself just as you are?
I believe that is a very beautiful perspective. It's a completely different perspective. Just like you said, that sex is usually associated with performance.
Mm-hmm.
But the way you put it, it is something that could serve you as an individual, not only as a couple, for example, so that you're not missing something when you are alone in your sexuality. I think the dance is a pretty good start of the day. I might use in my next morning.
Totally. We all should do it. And I think also what you said earlier about kind of how you understand sex or what sex means to you. And what most people answer is that sex, is a physical way of connecting between two people or more people, or, but what if we looked at sex just as a form of communication, as a form of connecting? And it has different dimensions. So one dimension is for yourself, your connection with your body and your pleasure, and enjoying yourself and self-pleasure is such an important part of healing and reconnecting and getting to know yourself. It's like, oh, what do I like? What kind of touch do I like? What turns me on? Where in my body do I feel pleasure? And then what I hear from people often is that, but self-pleasure is different. I feel like there's something lacking when I'm just by myself versus when I'm with another human being. But that's exactly what it's supposed to be, These are two different dimensions of sex. One is for you to explore. This is your space. And then you shift from that to connecting with another human being. And that can be so incredibly powerful and integrating and beautiful. But it can also be one of the most disconnecting and emptying experiences of your life. And it really depends on how connected you are with yourself and your ability to connect with another human being. And right now we live in this situationship and dating culture where most people look for love from places where it's not necessarily found. You know, one night stand, and I have nothing against one night stands, just want to highlight this. It's just a challenge that we have within the society at the moment, when most people actually crave for deep connection. They crave to be seen, to be heard, to be loved and accepted, but that also scares them the most. Because, you know, like I say, sex is not actually about sex. It's where our primary needs meet our primary fears. So then you want to connect, and you want to feel loved, and you want to feel good. Then you're so afraid of rejection. It's like, that's death. You're so afraid of abandonment. Oh, if I really let them see me, if I really connect, if I show up authentically in this sex and I tell them what I actually really like, they're going to leave me. They're not going to accept me. And that's why sex is so tricky. It can be so beautiful and then horrible at the same time. And that's why we need to learn the skills to navigate it, to build those connections together.
Well said. From what I hear from you, of course, you are a sexologist, but more of maybe also more of a life therapist who creates the right circumstances.
Maybe that's my new title, life therapist. I love that. I'll put that on my title now.
Yeah, definitely.
Who Anna Lindfors is.
Yeah, because if you approach sex in such a holistic way, it is not actually about the sex, that it will flow into the sex if you create the right circumstances. You mentioned self-love and having love with yourself. I heard Andrew Huberman said that when you masturbate, when you're alone, that creates some type of open loop. And I think that overlaps with what you were saying, that it can be very dangerous because you want to, maybe it's the difference between wanting to climax or exploring the possibility of a climax. I don't know if that makes sense.
Exactly. I mean,
because he said that there was some kind of, sorry, continue.
No, it's exactly what you said. It really depends on how you approach it. Right now, for example, what masturbation is to many, I guess I could say to many men, is you look at porn and then you do it as fast as possible, as effectively as possible, and then the goal is really to come, just to get that release. But what if you approached it as a moment just for yourself, connecting with your body, trying different types of touch on yourself? It sounds like such a foreign concept. Or what if you used your imagination instead of porn? It's a whole different dimension. It's similar to sex. And I mean, I think we should celebrate also these different dimensions. Oh, I'd love to share a story because it's really, I think it really highlights the kind of our understanding of different dimensions of sex. I had a client, and I'm sharing this with permission, and I'm sharing it anonymously. But she struggled with sex a lot in the past, and it was like difficulty to let people close and intimate. And then she found this amazing partner, and they discovered Tantra together. So what they did is they started doing these marathon Tantra sessions every single evening. 4-hour marathon sessions every single evening.
Wow.
And then one time she came to her session. She was like, Anna, I'm so exhausted. Like what? Like this sexual empowerment is so exhausting. Like I don't know how to keep up with this. I was like, okay, let's talk about this. Let's break it down. And the first question is like, well, why do you need to have these 4-hour tantric marathon sessions every single night? It's like, because we're sexually empowered. Like that's what we do. It's like, okay. So what does it mean to be sexually empowered? And then, we break it down. And it was just this idea that they had discovered. It's like, okay, so now we're super cool. Now that we're exploring with sex and we're doing these sessions, that's when we're fully connected. That's when we're integrating, and that's when we are empowered. But I think sexual empowerment comes from understanding that there's so many different dimensions to sex and to your sexuality. And yes, you can have these marathon tantric sessions and really enjoy and connect with your partner, but you can have a 5-minute quickie, this sigh of relief, and that's what you need in that moment. It's just about connecting with yourself, connecting with your partner to understand what you need in that moment. And I think that applies to self-pleasure as well. You can abstain from it. You can kind of hold on to that sexual energy, especially for men, if you feel it's emptying or if you feel that it's distracting. Yes, you can do that. But also for many men, it's problematic and it causes them more challenges than benefits. So you need to know yourself and you need to know what benefits you, not just in sex, but in all aspects of life.
That's very interesting and very funny as well. And I think that is a nice segue from connecting with yourself to connecting with your partner, or maybe just that one woman or man for that one night, of course. That's your preference, of course. It can also be good. But I find it interesting that sexual empowerment and checking in with yourself, it feels like a narrow path to walk on, since how can you align those paths? Because is it more like when I go out for a run and a friend wants me to run with him, I usually decline because we are not on the same pace? Is it the same with sexual desire, sexual empowerment, energy, or some sort of alignment? How do you connect so that you are running on the same pace with each other?
Oh, I love that. Oh, I absolutely love how you put it. Yes. That's perfect. It's all about learning your own rhythm. For example, in running, learning what distance you like to run and how that changes every day. Sometimes you feel a bit more tired, sometimes you feel a bit more energetic, sometimes you want to go to the distance, you want to enjoy the sunset, and sometimes you just want to do a quick spurt, and then finding a partner who runs with you. And on some days you might run a different path. You might run on your own, and then the next day it's like, hey, let's run together. Sometimes you have a set path, like, okay, we're doing this lap today. And sometimes it's like, hey, let's just go into the forest and see where we find ourselves. Yeah, that's perfect. I'll take that. I'll borrow that from you.
Yeah, of course. I do think that is a nice way to think of it, but of course that comes with a lot of hurdles as well. If we stay in the running metaphor,
Yeah,
because I can imagine that on the surface it is not always very clear. Maybe because I did not do the self exploration, or the other person did not explore themselves enough. Or what I wanted to say is that on the surface, you cannot always see if you're on the right race. I can imagine that over time you want to change pace with your partner, and I think it is difficult to stay on the same pace. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I mean, it's only natural that it changes. If we stay with the running theme, different factors impact how fast we run, how long we run throughout our lives. But to stay on the same pace with your partner, it really comes down to wanting to be at the same pace. I mean, at first, when you're choosing a partner, when you're connecting, it comes down to recognizing and understanding that, hey, this is a partner I could run with. Oh my God, I love it because people say a partner in crime, partner in run. Anyway, you recognize the person like, hey, we could run in the same direction. But then, over time things can happen and things don't necessarily always work out. And I think also what we need as a society is to understand and expand our perception of what love is, what sex is. Because not every person you meet is the love of your life. That's just the reality. But that doesn't mean that the connection you share is not meaningful or is inferior in some way. I think that you can have beautiful connections with human beings. And there's this kind of concept that you need to heal yourself before you can be in a relationship. And I buy into that to some degree. But I also believe, and that's what science is that you cannot heal relationship wounds on your own. So finding a partner with whom you can heal, with whom you can elevate, with whom you can learn. Because also with running, you start and you're really bad at it. Like you don't know which pace, you don't know how far, you don't know how to recover, you don't know what supplements to take. It's the same with sex. It takes skill. It takes time to learn about yourself and learn what turns you on. It takes time to learn your partner and communicate like, hey, this really turns me on when you touch me this way. I really feel safe when you do this. Or I need you to do this for me to feel safe, to let go. Or when you do this, I feel supported. When you do this, I feel sexy. Or like, how can I make you feel sexy? You know, it takes skill, and you need to learn that. And then when you learn that, you need to keep practicing. It's not like riding a bike. Well, kind of. You learn, you know how to ride a bike, but then
You'll remember the basics.
You remember the basics, but there's room for growth, and you can advance and elevate. But it all comes down to connecting and wanting to connect.
Interesting. So I think that if the basics are right, when the intention is I want to run with this partner, that you can run some miles together, and then you can decide along the way, wait, this might not be it, or we can proceed and learn and improve our running techniques and stuff like that.
Exactly. And also we have this idea that, breakups are horrible, and then you never speak to the person again, or they're an asshole. That doesn't need to be the case, because when you're connected and then you act from love, all you want is good for the other person, and you could share a beautiful connection. But then knowing yourself and knowing the other person's like, hey, this was fun, but maybe this doesn't work in the long run. We have different paces, we have different desires, and then you can let go. Or if the person is someone, okay, I want to grow with them. This is someone I want to walk in the same direction. And then you learn how to walk together. And that takes difficult discussions. That takes, learning how to navigate through conflicts. Because sex will not keep your relationship together. No matter how amazing it is. In the beginning, sex will not be enough. It's actually how you navigate through conflict, how you navigate through the difficulties, how you support each other, how you connect with each other, how you make each other feel seen and accepted. That's what makes you want to stay in the relationship, and that's what makes you grow. Also, as a human being, as an individual, we rarely talk about the benefits of relationships for our personal growth. We like to talk about, the other way around. Oh, you do personal growth, and then you have this amazing relationship. But it goes both ways.
I agree. It goes both ways indeed. And what I also find interesting is that I will use the metaphor for the last time now. But if you want to run with somebody, if you want to have sex with somebody, I can imagine that in the connecting process before picking a running mate, your judgment can be clouded because of trauma. And that you talk a lot about attachment styles and a way of connecting. When I speak for myself, I mean, I have a youth as well. And my youth hugely impacted my women of choice. And the difficult part in that for me, and I think for a lot of people, is that the familiarity with picking those partners you pick based on your youth. How do you make that shift? Because from healthy per se to something that is not as somebody you can run a marathon with. That was the last time.
Well, I guess I could give a brief introduction first to attachment styles, so that then the listeners who are not familiar with them understand what we're talking about. Basically, attachment styles just describe different ways we have in coping in relationships. And often they're formed in childhood in relation to how our parents took care of us. But what I want to highlight is that they're not set in stone. There's so much flexibility that you can do. You can work on things. And in many ways, we all portray traits from each attachment style. However, we do have one dominant attachment style. So for example, people with avoidant attachment, they're the hyper independent, strong independent women and men, and they're often high performance and really successful, but so scared of intimacy. They are the people who run rather than face conflict. And I think that's the best way to describe them. They get, anxiety about feeling trapped in a relationship. It's like, oh, what's going on? And you want to keep your options a little bit open. And then the opposite of that is the anxious attachment. Oh boy, they crave that external validation. They need to feel loved. They, even if it depends on how kind of, I don't want to say severe it is, but how anxious it is. But even if their partner leaves the room and then they get that response in their nervous system, it's like, oh, okay, they're going to abandon me. They're so afraid of abandonment. So if avoidant people are afraid of rejection, so anxious people are very afraid of abandonment. And then often they feel that they love their partner more than their partner loves them. And then they can get this feeling of resentment. Oh, they didn't meet my needs. They didn't make me feel loved. Oh, I love them, but it's like, And then a combination of the two, it's like, best of both worlds is a disorganized attachment style. And that often comes when there's severe childhood trauma. So then you're both avoidant of relationships because you're terrified of them, but then you're also anxious and you crave that validation, and you avoid intimacy, but you crave it at the same time. And in all of these attachment styles, sex is key, because sex is often used as a tool to connect. Because that's really the only way you think about intimacy. It's like intimacy, sex. Okay. So avoidant people, I avoid sex, or I have superficial sex because I don't want to get too intimate. And then anxious people, it's like, oh, I'm having sex with them. They must love me. Now I feel loved. And now this is what I'm having. And disorganized are just confused because it's like, okay, I'm scared of sex, but I'm having sex to feel that validation. And then you feel a bit, okay, why did I do that? Why did I break my boundaries? And it sounds like a kind of horrible mix, but we all have these traits. We all know that. We all carry them from childhood. And I think also what's not spoken about enough is that different people bring out different traits in us. So for example, let's say you have an avoidant attachment style, or you're a little bit scared of intimacy and you want that connection. And you meet a partner who's extremely avoidant. I'm telling you, you become anxious. You get that anxiety. Oh, are they leaving me? Why are they not responding to me? They bring out those traits in you. And also for an anxious person, if you meet a partner who's even more anxious than you, they crave constant validation and they can't leave your side, you feel a bit suffocated. It's like, okay, what's going on here? So it as important it is to understand yourself and your attachment style. It's important to understand how other people impact you. Like I said, we all carry these traits, and then understanding where you are. Like I said, I've made some Instagram posts. I can also add a link to your listeners so they can test their dominant attachment style. But understanding where you are and what your challenges are in building connections, then you can move towards a secure attachment. And that means that you are independent, but you're able to ask for help. You're able to receive help without feeling guilty. You're able to build intimacy. You're able to connect and have sex, enjoy sex, without necessarily using it as a tool for intimacy, for closeness, for validation. But it's about connection and communication. And that's what, we all have the power to move towards building secure attachment and to building nourishing and flourishing relationships. It takes work, which not everyone is prepared to do. But I think more and more people are waking up to the fact that, for example, they have personal trainers, nutrition coaches, doctors, professional coaches, and then your relationship is just messed up. And that's the main predictor of your health. That's the main predictor of your longevity. Loneliness is more harmful than smoking. And then we pay so much attention into all of these areas of life, and relationship is just like this black box, and that we're now slowly starting to open up and understanding the true power of them.
I think it does come off as a black box for a lot of people because it requires a lot of vulnerability, like you are able to describe, because I feel like this in this society, it is more of an end goal to have sex, but to be really intimate with each other, I think it requires to look into yourself, into the darkness as well, and to take care of yourself and the other person. And what I also would like to talk about with you is the polarity between femininity and masculine. I think that is an overlooked topic to me. I mean, maybe it is among men more less talked about, but the importance of that polarity, and that it exists both inside us. So the feminine and the masculine side. Could you talk more about the importance of knowing that in yourself and what it even means for men and women?
I mean, masculine and feminine energies, they're just these kind of universal energies that we just put this label. This is masculine, this is feminine, that we all carry within ourselves, like you said. Healthy masculine represents this stability, safety, leadership, execution, and these traits that then the feminine needs to feel safe. Because then feminine is all about spontaneity, flow, intuition, groundedness, vision, creativity, this overflow. So I love this metaphor that the people use, that feminine energy is the water, it's the life force, and it's flowing and it's shifting form. And the masculine energy is the container, whether it's a glass, it's the lake, it's the kind of boundaries that then help the feminine energy flourish and to be in its full essence. If you have either of them too much, that's not good, because you shift out of balance. And right now what we see, and we could talk another hour about this whole topic, but I'll try to be brief. What we see right now is a lot of toxic masculine, toxic feminine kind of fighting against each other. Toxic masculine is very controlling, fear-based, very ego-based, success-driven, and toxic femininity is this complaining, gossiping, victim mode. And right now it's kind of everyone's fighting about who's having it more difficult. I don't know if that makes sense, and it sounds a bit abstract, but if we elaborate from there and we look at how society functions, for example, we go to the working world, and what happens there is that a lot of women need to abandon these feminine sides of themselves. Same goes to men. You go in, the office culture, you need to be masculine. You're not going to cry. You're not going to be insecure. You're not going to be flowy and, full of ideas, because you're going to execute. You're going to be very effective and, you're going to do all these things. And what happens is that when we live in this world where we're all kind of hyper masculine and disconnected from that feminine, and then that leads to a culture where it's like fake it till you make it, and more ego driven, and you don't really let people close because they're going to hurt you, and all of these factors. And in many ways, I think the answer is to reconnect with the feminine, and it sounds simple, but imagine if all men felt safe to tap into their emotions, to emotionally connect with each other, to emotionally connect with women. Imagine if women felt safe to surrender into the flow without being in that survival mode and having to be in control of everything and succeeding and executing. Imagine if you were able to surrender, connect with yourself, and learn to love yourself through who you are instead of the role you're playing. Because right now, everyone is playing a role. That's how the society functions. We're playing a role at workplace, we're playing a role at relationships, we're playing a role, with sex. We're playing different roles with ourselves. But imagine if we could build a world, for example, where you go to the office and then, Linda from the office comes and she asks you like, hey, how are you? And instead of saying like, oh my God, yeah, I'm so good. I just closed the deal and I'm running these Excels and oh, it's so good. You would say, yeah, thanks for asking. I'm having a really difficult time in my relationship right now. And I feel blocked and I feel a bit lost. But besides all of that, work is going well. Thanks. Imagine how that would change the entire culture where we could be ourselves because we
It
would
would.
be connected and we could connect with each other and we would understand that actually we're all kind of trying to figure things out. We all have challenging times. We all experience pain, and that does not make us weak or unlovable or worse than some other people. It makes us human. And when we understand that, we can be humans together. We can connect with the masculine, we can connect with the feminine. For example, I'm very much in my masculine energy when I'm working. I'm building things and, at these meetings and setting boundaries and executing. And then I love being in my feminine, going, just connecting in nature and feeling the flow and being creative and especially with sensuality. We can have that, but in order to have that, we need to reconnect with ourselves and each other. And we need to create an authentic culture where we feel safe to be ourselves.
I think I have to quit podcasting because the answer to everything is reconnecting with yourself. Eventually, when you want to make healthy choices, it's always the same. So
Yeah.
I think that's funny because I think society asks from us to work in a very linear way of living, but like a very rigid line from here to here, where you are not allowed to deviate from. And I think it should be more like a sine wave. And
Riding different waves.
yeah, exactly. You go to the left, you go to the right. It doesn't matter how you want to put it. Left masculine, right feminine, left creative, or you name it. I think it should be more. It should be possible that we are not the same person every day, and
Exactly.
I think that is a healthy way to look at it in a more practical way for the couples that are in a longer relationship. I have friends in longer relationships. You see a lot of people divorcing nowadays. How do you keep it sexy for the long run?
I mean, that's a complex question in many ways because
Let's
like
start
we
with
just discussed
communication,
kind of
maybe. Sorry.
But I mean, if you go back, so we look at what's going on in the society. And so we have disconnected people in performance mindset, just kind of role playing through life. And then you choose a partner from that mindset. When you don't really know yourself that well, and then your partner might not know themselves that well, and then you get together and you have a beautiful time for the first few years, then the foundation starts to crack when you realize like, wait, what do I actually want from life? Who am I? What's happening with my partner? And often unresolved trauma surfaces around, after the age of 35 or in your 40s, and that's when you start to question everything. So really, the key for building and maintaining a nourishing relationship, it's such a cliche, but it really comes down to wanting to do that, wanting to connect and working through things together, and understanding that you go through different phases. Like with, women's cycle, you have more desire other times of the month than on other times of the month. You go through different life phases. You might have children. Your sex life looks completely different during that time when you have young children versus when you don't. It's all about adapting and building that connection from the place where you're at. Practical steps that I would take is take 1 hour every week. If that's too much, take 30 minutes every week. If that's too much, take 15 minutes to just be present with each other, yourself. Like, hey, how do you feel today? How do you feel in this connection? How do you feel about our sex life? What would you want to change, or what would you want to add? What would make you feel wanted? What would make you feel loved? And just by doing that, taking that moment of pausing together, that can be powerful on its own. But it takes effort, and it takes knowing who you are, knowing who you're becoming, and it takes a lot of growth. When you do that, it's very powerful. And then there's so many ways that you can expand from that. How you can expand sex together, how you can expand communication about sex together, and pleasure, how you can learn how to navigate through conflicts. All of these things you can learn, but you need to want to learn to do it. You need to want to learn to do it together. If not, it's very difficult, if not impossible. And that's also okay. Sometimes you go separate ways, and like we discussed earlier, you can do that with love. Not the end of the world. Love is always there, it just shifts its form.
Interesting. And I find it beautiful that you say that it takes work, because obviously you are the expert on this, but different stimuli don't have the same effect when you repeat them over time. And it takes effort to explore maybe new stimuli or something. And what I find interesting is that at that point, people tend to, well, that's overgeneralizing, sorry, but a lot of people tend to find that boring, like it's not working anymore. But you were not exactly working in the first place. It was just nice until that moment, and then work started to occur. I see that people find it challenging to start the work and schedule sex once a week, for example. Like, it's not an appointment, right?
Yeah, and I mean, there's so much that we could talk about when it comes to relationships and so on. But really, I think we need to let go of this idea that you find the love of your life and it's this Hollywood story, and then you live happily ever after. Because the reality is that within a long relationship, you have many different relationships, so to speak, and it changes over time. And you change as people, your hormones change, your bodies change. So that's why you always need to get to know that new person, that new version of your loved one and of yourself. And yes, scheduling sex, I don't know, some people say it's boring. I don't think so. The challenge with it is that, especially for women, you can't really predict your desire that well unless you do cycle-based living. And then you know that, okay, these 2 weeks of the month, that's when I feel desire. So maybe schedule sex during those times and fully embrace it and enjoy it and feel and really connect with each other. And then other times when you don't necessarily feel that desire. And also, I just want to highlight that we focus on women a lot here when we talk about desire and kind of the cycle that changes, but men go through shifts too. Like men are not always horny. It's shocking to hear, because we have this idea, oh, men are always horny, but that's not the case. But the point is that there's so many ways to build intimacy. And actually, if you think about connecting with a new human being, sex might not be the most intimate thing you share. It could be, the moment when you look into each other's eye, you hold each other, you hold each other close, you cuddle, you don't have sex. You feel such a strong connection. You're revealing your soul to the person, your heart to the person, and that's very intimate. Sex can be very intimate if you make it so, but it's just about understanding how you want to connect with each human being. Everyone you connect, we make a decision. You walk down the street, you see thousands of people, you don't connect. Not every single one of them is the love of your life. You see them, you acknowledge them, and you connect on some level. But it's about learning, okay, this person is someone I want to hold close. This person is someone I want to grow with. And that's the key. to a happy life, to a happy relationship, or many of them.
Again, it comes down, like you said earlier, to go from performance to exploration, I guess, to finding the connection instead of, exactly. I think we have not covered all of it, but I think we have a nice, how can we describe what we have formulated here?
Introduction, overview,
exactly.
Just kind of little sparks of the topic, and
exactly. We could podcast for like 3 to 4 hours, and we might do that in the future to dive deeper. I think it is such a broad topic to discover. It's a lifelong exploration, I guess. I wanted to end this conversation with a question, and that is, what would you want people to ask themselves in this discovery?
Wow, I love that question. But to choose one is challenging. I guess I would go, we've talked a lot about connecting with our bodies. So I guess I would go with that. And it just tune into your body every day. It's like, how do I feel in my body? Such a simple question, and yet so forgotten.
I think that's a beautiful question, because I feel like everything you spoke about comes from that place.
Yeah, connecting. It's not about mind over matter. It's not about eating when you should eat. It's about learning to know when you're hungry, learning to know what turns you on, learning to know what you need to feel safe. Not only just to think that you are safe, but all of these factors, it comes from connecting. Yeah.
Beautiful. Is there something else you want to share with the listeners?
I just hope that you all take one tiny moment for yourself every day. Tune into that song, or just tune into your body, tune into your mind, and build that loving relationship with yourself through that. Because, and not because you need to, not because I'm telling you, but because you want to, because you deserve to. Then enjoy the benefits of it.
Great message. I want to thank you for all of your knowledge, for your energy, because like I said in the invitation, knowledge is one thing, but I feel like you truly embody it. I've met you on the summit, and you glow your knowledge. So thank you so much. And you also have a beautiful course. Please, how can people find you on the course and on social media?
Yeah, well, on social media, it's Heal with Anna. Yeah, just slide into my DMs. I love to discuss these topics and help in any way I can. I work with clients individually if people really want to dive deep into the journey. So via the Heal method, right now I'm fully booked, but I do open new places for July. So if people want to do that, they can reach out. And yes, I created the Biohacking Love and Relationships course with Biohacker Center. And I feel like that's a great starting point into reconnecting, learning about your body, learning about your anatomy, learning about your partner, learning how to enhance arousal, how to enhance sex, and then really learning to communicate, learning how to heal and connect. So I definitely recommend that as a starting place for those who want to embark on this journey.
If you, and I'm talking to the listener right now, if you ever have troubles with connecting with yourself, connecting with your partner, enhancing your sex life, please follow Anna. And Anna, I would like to thank you for this conversation, and hope we can do it again in the near future.
We'll definitely do that. Thank you so much. An amazing day.
You too.